Okay, welcome. I want to quickly go through a nice option in the read underscore CSV function in the reader package that will help us ignore some information when we import a CSV file. So let's say I would like to import the following file. So I'm going to store this comma separated data to an object that I call my data. So you can think about my data as like your file of comma separated um, data. So it looks like this. So the data that I'm going to import looks like this table that I've typed up here. And we talked about the heuristic that is used in the read underscore CSV function and how it determines the data type for each of the columns or the column type. So let's think about how that would change if I added an extra row to the previous example. So the previous example had one row of the column names and then 3 rows of data. So maybe to illustrate how this heuristic row works, I'm going to add an extra row of data to this. It's going to have a missing value over here. So let's think about how do missing values affect the column types that are assigned. Over here, it has a missing value, which is not assigned correctly. It's assigned with the question mark. Over here, we added a string to the date column. And over here, we added a logical to the string column. And we want to think about what happens. So in my code down here, I added a comment that is just letting the reader know that I added this extra row from the previous code. But notice this is not shaded in green like my comments normally are. And that's because it's reading this as like text in my comma separated file. It's thinking that my last entry in the last row, last column, this is all one entry. So let me run this code cell and you can see what I'm talking about. So it did not read this as a comment. It read that as a character string and it added it all to false. Okay. So I want to kind of test to see what's going to happen. And what I want is this last false is actually entered correctly using all caps. So I want to fix this. And I want to see what's going to happen when I import this, but I want the logical false. I don't want this stuff to be treated as a character string. I want that to be read as a comment. Treated as a comment, at least when it's imported. So in other words, I want to ignore that text when I import it. There is a nice argument that I could use in read underscore CSV, which is the comment argument. And here I'm going to set this argument equal to pound, the pound symbol or the hashtag, depending on what you call that. And what this means is it's going to ignore any text that comes after that symbol. So it's going to ignore that symbol as well as anything that comes after it. So if I were to run this command, it now says my data had one row where it had this pound symbol. So ignore the pound symbol and everything else that comes after it. So all of this stuff was ignored when we did the import. And that's why this last entry in this last row now is just the logical false. And then we can check to see how adding this. So there's kind of the one point here is that this is a really nice argument that we can add inside of the read CSV function, this comment argument. That's great. And then the second thing, just to reinforce, is how does this heuristic work when it's checking column types? This first column, it went through and said it contains things that are true, false, whether they're in caps or not, or if it's just the T or the F, and it had a missing value. So if it has true, false, regardless of the case, or T or F, it treats it as a logical. The fact that there was a missing value here does not affect that heuristic, and it still treats this as a logical and still converted the false that was in lowercase to the correct all cap false. It corrected the capital T, which is not the right way to encode the logical true. It corrected it, and now it's coded as the logical true. With the numeric, we had this question mark that was added. This is not the right way to encode a missing value. So it's reading this as a character string, and that affected the column type that was assigned to this column of the CSV file. So when we didn't have that missing value up here, this was read as a numeric. When we added a question mark, that was a missing value that was encoded with a question mark is not the right way. This changed it from a numeric that was encoded as a decimal. It now changed it to a character. The date field, we added character string hello. So that's going to change the formatting, the column type, to change from the date that we had up here when we had all dates. When I add one value to that column that is not a date, whether it's a character string or not, it's going to change the column type to something else. It's going to change it to a character string. And the fact that I added a logical onto this last column, it already had strings in it. So it's just going to treat this as a character string. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk about how we can define and override the column types that are assigned during the import. Okay, thanks everyone.